Greetings! It is time for another edition of Volcano Me. Well, I figured I'd do a Volcano Me on something that is actually relative to Japan. I'm sure some of you guys have noticed in the news lately that there's been a lot of going on between Japan and China, and things have not been going well. China has been getting really pissed off over on Japan, and so much that there's been major protests in Beijing, in so much that Japanese embassies actually got egged and vandalized and also graffitied. So what the heck did Japan do to piss China off so badly? Well, that all comes down to the Senkaku Island. The Senkaku Islands are very, very small band of islands right smack dab in between Okinawa and Taiwan and the East China Sea. They're directly due east of China and Taiwan, but they're also slightly west of Okinawa. Now, as you guys all know, Okinawa is owned by Japan, and Taiwan is technically owned by China, although Taiwan would tell you otherwise. These islands are uninhabited. Let me repeat myself. These islands are uninhabited. These islands are very, very, very tiny. In fact, get all of this. One of the islands that Japan and China is having a dispute over is 5 yards long. No, not 5 miles long, 5 yards. About half the distance of a 1st and 10 on a football field. 5 yards. China is getting so angry over this that some of the Chinese are even calling for war. Japanese bloggers on the blogosphere have even been saying death to Japs. They've been even yelling and screaming and giving death threats to the Japanese embassy over this. So what the heck happened? Well, this brought up pain and old bad blood between the two countries. First, a little history lesson for those of you who know. In the beginning of World War II, long before we got involved in World War II, Japan invaded China. Japan bombed the crap out of China, and they occupied from Mongolia down to China, and Japan just nakedly invaded and took over all kinds of islands near China, as well as mainland China during World War II, while the United States was isolationist at that time. Years later, as we all know, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. We got pissed, so we fought back. After America dropped nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan officially unconditionally surrendered to the United States, and they had to sign a peace treaty with the United States, a peace treaty that still technically stands to this day. Japan had to surrender all of the islands and all the lands that they had conquered during the Imperial War. All islands with the exception of the 4 main islands that make up Japan itself. But they had to surrender just about almost all the other islands surrounding it. Now, the United States obviously turned some of those islands into military bases, like the ones in the Philippines, Okinawa, and many other places. Obviously, Japan gave China back to China. Now, one of the islands that America took over was the Senkaku Islands, uninhabited islands. The United States held on to these islands along with many other islands that they took from Japan. They held on to them until 1972. That's when America finally gave those islands back to Japan. Except here's the thing. When the peace treaty happened, 2 things happened. First of all, purely and possibly by accident or due to some legal technical paperwork or whatever, we said that the Senkaku Islands were part of Japan, when China said, whoa, wait a minute, that's actually a part of China. For a while, they just let it go. Now, the islands were privately owned for the last couple of years. In September of 2012, Japan just up and announced that they were officially going to annex these islands. Japan officially announced that they were buying these islands from the private owner and were officially going to start working on them, perhaps even start doing business on them, especially for fishing grounds and whatever. That's when China went angry. Chinese protests erupted all over Beijing, Hong Kong, and other places. The Japanese embassy was thrown at by rage eggs. Many other protests were sparked, and also along with many others. China accused Japan of going back to their old imperialist ways that they were in the 1930s, saying that Japan was once again invading Chinese territory, and so on. Japan says, whoa, 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 what are you guys complaining about? We've technically had ownership of these islands since 1972 when the Americans gave it back to them. Here's the thing. Japan claims that they've owned these islands, the Senkaku Islands, since 1895. China claims that Imperial Japan stole these islands from them, along with many other of the islands, in the middle of World War II, and that these islands were still stolen property that needed to be given back. Japan again up and announced that they were going to take these islands. By the way, I guess just to show I'm biased, the Senkaku Islands also have a second name. They're also known as, oh boy, my Chinese is not as good as my Japanese, so I sure hope I'm pronouncing this right, but they're also known as the Diaoyu Islands. Diaoyu Islands. In the past month, the Chinese and the Japanese have been over a territorial dispute. The Chinese government has been flexing their muscles and even threatening military threats, insomuch that the Chinese have even sent a few military boats over to the area. The Japanese have been sending over tons of survey boats, scientists, and fishing boats. So these islands are technically no longer completely uninhabited. The thing is starting to escalate in so much that the U.S. may have to get involved. And the United States is on record saying they're not taking sides with anybody. But I want you guys to know just how screwed we'll be should this thing escalate even further. Remember that peace treaty I mentioned to you guys after the end of World War II? As you know, in 1945, we told the Japanese to completely and totally disarm. We were so worried that the Imperial Japan would go back to their old ways again. So we told the Japanese that they had to completely and have a pacifist treaty. Naturally, Japan said, well, wait a minute, what if we come under attack, especially now that we got a whole bunch of new enemies? The United States promised in 1945, should Japan ever come under attack by any enemy, that the United States military be there to defend it. And by the way, that's still on the record, and we still have military bases in Japan. Here's where things get screwy. As you know, Japan is picking a fight with China. Now, what country does America owe a lot of money to? Oh yeah, China. We owe China at least $1 or $2 trillion, if not more than that. China owns a lot of our debt, and they own a lot of American bonds. Here's the thing that happens. Should China and Japan get into an actual military dispute, on paper, we signed a treaty to Japan, promising them that militarily we would have their back. The problem is, they're picking a fight with a country who we owe a lot of money to. So yeah, in case you haven't noticed, the Obama administration has not announced that they've taken a side. And to be quite frank with them, I can't blame them. Because we can't officially take a side, because if we take Japan's side, China's going to get pissed, and then they'll start selling our debt like crazy, devaluing our dollar even further. We take China's side, it looks like we're abandoning Japan, especially at a time of need. And then we violate our treaty. Here's my 2 cents about this whole thing. First of all, I think that this is ridiculous that both of these countries are getting in such a big fight over these teeny tiny islands. No, seriously, go look this up. Many of these islands are not even a mile wide. So I know you're thinking about, so why are they making such a big deal over these islands? Why do you think they're making such a big deal about these islands? Very easy. They just discovered oil near these islands. Yep. They've just discovered oil and natural gas near the Senkaku Islands. Also, the place is very, very, very rich in fishing grounds. Now, would you like to know my theory? My theory is this. It's because of the tsunami that hit Japan last year. The tsunami hit northern Japan, it hit Sendai, and it hit many parts of Japan that were very, very sensitive to fishing. Then, you know, we had a nuclear meltdown. Now, although the nuclear meltdown, the thing didn't go off like a nuclear bomb like everybody said it was, people are fine. But everybody's scared of the radiation, and nobody wants to buy fish or squid or any seafood from that part of Japan because they're so worried and scared over radiation and radiated fish and so on. My guess and my theory is this. Japan just up and took these islands back and declared, stamped the flag down. No, Japan literally did that. They put the Japanese flag straight up on the Senkaku Islands, and that's why China got all worked up. Because these islands are apparently very close to Taiwan. My theory is that Japan really needs the money real bad. They got hit with the tsunami real bad, and by the way, did you know that last year China surpassed Japan as an economic superpower? China is now the #2 world economy on planet Earth, and guess what is going to happen 3 or 4 years from now? By 2017, China will surpass the United States as the #1 country in the world, both economically and militarily. By the way, that's regardless of who you vote for in November. It's gonna happen. China just surpassed Japan. Japan is now the #3 economic country in the world, and the tsunami was simply the icing on the cake, the final insult to injury as of all of this. So to me, this tells me that Japan is desperate. They really need the money, they really need the oil, and they really need the fishing. China, I'll just flat up be biased, I think they're being bullies. I got a feeling that this video is going to be censored for Asian videos. I will say this about China. Why are you guys bitching about these islands now? Now, I know you guys are complaining that you should have had these islands brought back to you in 1972. Because in 1972, that's when America released these islands back to Japan. If you wanted to cause a stink about this, you should have done it in 1972. You didn't care. You didn't care that it was privately owned by a Japanese guy. But when the Japanese government went ahead and annexed these islands, that's when you yelled and screamed and got angry about this. And again, I know why. It's because you discovered oil. So you discovered oil and gas and fishing. So now you want these islands. Like I said, China technically hasn't had full control over these islands since 1895. And right now, China is acting like a father who's abandoned their child, but then 18 years later, that child won the lottery. And then the father suddenly shows up and says, "Son, my dear old son, I love you. Hey, I heard you won the lottery." It's all like, "Hey, Dad, where you been all my life?" "Well, I heard you won the lottery, son." So, China, you didn't give a crap about the Diaoyu Islands or the Senkaku Islands over the past 30 years, but suddenly you're all of a sudden interested in these islands. Gee, I wonder why. Oil? Fish? We want these islands back right now! Of course, Japan made a dick move by just up and planting the Japanese flag on this thing without consulting the United Nations, without consulting, and without even telling the Chinese. And again, these islands are very close to Taiwan as well as Okinawa. Now, if you take a look on a map, and I'm going to show you this on a map, the Senkaku Islands are flat, solidly in between Okinawa and Taiwan. So you got two economic superpowers fighting over these teeny tiny islands with a lot of good fishing ground and possible oil drilling. Now, would you like to know my solution? If I were president, or if I was in the State Department, I know what I would do. If I was with the UN, to me, this solution is so easy. I would just pull a King Solomon on them. Split the damn islands up! There's at least 8 or 9, possibly 10 of them. And again, really nice fishing grounds, and there's gotta be oil on both sides. I think the solution to this problem is very simple. Split the damn islands up. But no, seriously, I think this is the ultimate win-win solution. Let me show you this map here, okay? I say Japan get the eastern islands. They get more of the small islands, and they get all of the waters to the northeast part, the part that's facing Okinawa. China gets the western side of it, and they get the western side of the big island. And as for the biggest island, I would split that island in two. Have that island, both countries got to share that island. You can build a city or a military base or whatever, have a solid border there with guards and so on, although have some sort of a treaty in case, there's a fire on the island. To help each other out. It might even be a good tourist destination, Some people might go over and says, "Hey, you want to see the Japanese and Chinese border all on one border?" I think this would be a really good idea because A, it extends both countries' borders. China, you get more property, you get more ocean, your borders are extended past Taiwan all the way to halfway where these islands are. Japan, their borders get extended from Okinawa all the way out to where these islands are. Just pull a King Solomon and split the damn islands in half, and somebody please mail me my Nobel Peace Prize.